Madness. This is 50 years of madness. In this corner, you have 1967. In this corner, you have 2018, and all of the NHL hockey worlds in between. Now, I always see this debate over goaltenders and different eras, and usually that'll be followed up with, well, the goaltenders were really bad in the 80s. Not exactly. The game completely changed in the 80s. And measuring when goaltending was great or not great is, well, it's difficult. But there are some stats that I found when I did some digging that give me a good idea of when a goaltender really hit his stride. Now, you start off with Johnny Bower, 1967. Now, if a goaltender's name is underlined in red, this here, maroon anyways, that means that they won the Stanley Cup that year. So Johnny Bower, they win the Cup. He has a .925 save percentage. Now, the league's average save percentage is in light blue. Are we good? We're good. .907 was the average, meaning Johnny Bower was .018 above average in the league. 1968, Bruce Gamble and Johnny Bower, both .934, both .024 ahead of average. Jacques Plante for St. Louis in 1969 leads the way. The average in the league was .908. He had a .940. So Jacques Plante right there is .032 above the league average, meaning so far that's the highest number we've seen. Plante, though, would come in 1971 with the best one on the board. Jacques Plante, .944 in a league where the save percentage was .903. So 1970 to 1971, league-wide, the save percentage goes from .912 to .903. That's expansion. That's watering down the game a little bit. But Plante, no. And Eddie Giacomin at .922, not unnoteworthy because he's .019 above league average at .903. But Plante, .041. So Jacques Plante had an amazing season for the Toronto Maple Leafs that year. The following year, we're still at .903, and Esposito leads the way, tied with Gump Worsley of the Minnesota North Stars. I don't have a Minnesota North Stars tiny little magnet, so there you go. 903 is the average. They're both at .934. So a full 10 percentage points lower than what Plante had the year before. Save percentage drops below 900 in 1973. It goes down to 896. Ken Dryden leads the way with a 926. This is substantial, and I'll tell you why. So you've got a 926 for Dryden to an 896 save percentage league-wide. You then take a look over to this past season, 2018. You have a 912 save percentage, so that's 16 points higher. And your best save percentage is Carter Hutton, who's 5 points higher, and he played less games than Dryden. So this is why when people compare Dryden to current goalies and they go, well, his numbers weren't as good. Well, yeah, but look league-wide. His numbers were excellent. Bernie Parent, also a pretty solid goaltender. Bernie Parent posts a goals against average of .036 higher than the league average of 896 when he has a 932. So again, that is a large statement of just how strong goaltending was when it was Bernie Parent. So league-wide, there's a lot of goals being scored, not on Parent. 1975, Rogie Vachon for the LA Kings and Gary Edwards of the LA Kings both finished in the top three. So I only did top three goaltenders. Vachon's 927, league save percentage was down to 890 at this stage. It's still at 890 in 1976 when Chico Resch leads the way with a 928, followed by Ken Dryden at 927. 1977, save percentage is at 891 league-wide. There's Ken Dryden with a 920. So, again, consistently, Dryden, when he plays, and he did retire briefly there, because he didn't like the offers being made by the Montreal Canadiens, and the idea was, well, we don't really need you anyways. And then he left, and they had a year without him, and they went, okay, we really need Ken Dryden. This is why when people say, well, they would have won no matter what, they didn't need Dryden, that's where it becomes obvious they did. And I'll get to that in the history videos, which I know everybody's watching. 1978, the league average drops to a low of 889. He's still at 922. 1979, it's down to 883. Dryden's now at 909. Chico Resch leads the way at 914. goals have started really taking over at this point. So you look, your league leader at 914, nowhere near where the leaders were in 67 or 68. So 79, we're getting into pretty big offensive numbers. And I don't know where Claude Giroux is. That's why I put that on the board. I'm really upset that Claude Giroux isn't on this list. 1980, the save percentage drops to 882. Your leader is Denny Herron, who's just taken over the Montreal Canadiens in the wake of the retirement of Ken Dryden. Dryden retired while he was at the top of his game, which is always a good move. And it is another reason why when people talk about Dryden, he didn't play very long. Well, he could have played for another 5 or 6 years if he'd wanted to, but he retired. Denny Herron, though, comes in, does very well for them. 907 save percentage in a league where it has an 882. He's .025 ahead of league average. 1981, there's an interesting dynamic here in that Rick St. Croix for the Philadelphia Flyers is the league leader with a 913 save percentage in a league which now has an average save percentage of 876. Yeah, 876 is average. So again, when you're looking at a goaltender from the 80s and you see like an 890 save percentage, you go, oh, these guys stunk. Game was completely different. Rick St. Croix had an amazing year for Philly, and it's one of those weird things. He doesn't show up anywhere else on the board. I know he didn't have an extremely long career, and seeing this on the board kind of makes me think, you kind of need to do a video about a couple of these guys. Sevigny is second for Montreal with a 908. And it's another Montreal goaltender. Montreal's done very well with goaltenders. 1982, Denny Herron gets back to the top with a 911 save percentage in a league that is now down to 873. So this is the year, 81-82 is when all the records are getting broken and everybody's scoring 50 goals and 100 points. And Denny Herron is the only goaltender above a 900 save percentage. Grant Fuhr's second with an 898. So again, you look at career averages. Grant Fuhr isn't very good by career average standards for today, but for back then, he was pretty darn good on a team that didn't really play defense. They didn't really feel like it. And Billy Smith there with an 898. Smith shows up on the board a few times, and, they're winning Stanley Cups at this stage of the game. 1983, Rolly Melanson. So Rolly the goalie is your leader with a 909. 875 is the league average. Now, 1984 and 1985, that is when we have a new low, where both years the leader has a 903 save percentage. The average is 873 in 1984. The average is 875 in 1985. Melanson leads the way again, so 2 years in a row, Rolly the goalie is the best for save percentage. And Skorodensky is your leader for the Chicago Blackhawks in 1985. And that was the name I'm putting up here, and I'm going, man, I have to discuss this guy at some point. Pelle Lindbergh there with an 899. Of course, Lindbergh would not make it to the next season. He was involved in a car accident. And Bob Froese took over. Froese, meanwhile, and that's how it was pronounced at the time, 909 save percentage turned out to be pretty good in the league with an 874 save percentage. There's Clint Malarchuk with an 895. So again, Malarchuk doesn't appear to be a very strong goaltender, and yet he's top 3 in save percentage with an 895. 1987, it's an 885 save percentage, and Cujo leads the way. And that's 93. I'm over here, 87, 880. I'm like, wait, Cujo. Getting ahead of myself. Hextall, 902. Again, he's the only one with a save percentage above 900. Bob Sauvé. Sauvé also shows up in up here, 1980. So 1980 and 1987, Bob Sauvé gets into the top 3 in save percentage. So it's one of those weird things. And there's Brian Hayward with an 893 and Glenn Hanlon with an 893. 1988, Patrick Roy leads the way with a 900 save percentage. That's right, 900 led the league. So think about it this way. Carey Price came off of a season that we can all kind of agree wasn't a Carey Price type season. Nobody would have nominated him for Vezina. He had a 900 save percentage, the same as Patrick Roy had in 1988 when he was a world beater. League average was 880, so it's only a .02 difference between your league leader and your average. 1989, save percentage dropped to 879, but Patrick Roy goes up to a 908. So Patrick Roy is getting better. And 1990, Patrick Roy has a 912 save percentage in a league that has an 881 save percentage on average. So again, Patrick Roy's numbers, people look and they say, oh, well, Roy's save percentage wasn't that good, and yet he was leading the league or close to it. 1991, he's right here at second, 906 in a league with a save percentage of 886. Now, a name that stands out to me is Kerry Taco for the Minnesota North Stars. And Taco had an amazing year that year as a backup for Casey. It was kind of this really nice 1-2 punch that Minnesota had that year. But again, if you're younger and you're looking back on stats, you'll be like, that was just a crappy year for them. No, they were among the league's best. 1992, Patrick Roy, number 1 with a 914. Bob Essenza shows up in second. Joseph and Van Beesbroek on the list as well. There are times where I may show more than 3 because there was ties in number. For instance, in 1988, where you have Hayward, Stefan, Hrudey, and Barrasso, all with 896 save percentages. That Kelly Hrudey that you see on TV all the time, he was actually a pretty solid goaltender. And it's funny because he's very self-deprecating, but I remember Hrudey being very solid for the Islanders and then being pretty darn good for a Kings team that also sometimes forgot how defense works. 1993, here we are now. Cujo, 885 save percentage. Cujo's at 911. Potvin, 910. And then there's Belfour at 906. Belfour, a couple years earlier, led the league with a 910. And I think, Belfour will lead the league again in 2000 with a 919, which sounds great. But league average has gone up by 19 points in that period of time. 1994 marks the year where defense starts to matter again. It's at an 895% or 895 save percentage overall, which is the highest it had been since 1974. So 20 years later, and goaltending is starting to matter again. Hasek leads the way with a 930 save percentage. Van Beesbroek with a 924. Van Beesbroek's 924 is second, and it would have been first in every single year going back to 1976. So again, you're seeing this change in the game. And it's not unusual that this is how this works, because Hasek was amazing in Buffalo. Van Beesbroek played a very solid game behind a Florida team meant to win that way. And Jersey is starting to play the trap as well. So there's numerous teams starting to figure out, hey, if we can play really solid defense and shut down all this crazy scoring that goes on, we have a better chance to win. 1995 goals against, or save percentage goes above 900 for the first time since 1972. This is, and I've got trap written right here because that's 1995. There's Hasek again with a 930. Osgood and Tebow are tied with a 917. And it's weird because 917 is what Tuukka Rask had this year. And you're not going to hear a whole lot of talk about how fantastic and he should be Vezina level. And yet back then, 917 was pretty good. 1996, Hasek leads the way again with a 920 save percentage. Save percentage drops below 996, so a little bit of a clawback, but not for long, because in 97 it's back up to a 905. There's Hasek again with a 930. Hasek has a 932 in 98. The league average is up to 906. The league average is at 908. Now, to put this in perspective again, that 908 is better than the league leaders, almost tied with the league leader of 83 and of 86 as well. So this is a completely different game at this stage, that quickly. Hasek, though, with 932. Barrasso and Kidd tied with 922. That's right. Trevor Kidd had a 922 save percentage for the Carolina Hurricanes and was top 3 in the league. Let that percolate. 1999, Dominik Hasek, again, 937 in a league which is now up to a 908. 908 is equal to 1969. So we're getting back into a region where scoring isn't all that prevalent. 2000, though, save percentage drops to 904. It drops to 903 in 2001. Belfour leads the way for Minnesota. Turco leads the way for Minnesota, which is now Dallas. Yes, they moved to Dallas in the mid-90s, so I can call them Dallas. Turco was fantastic and yet doesn't get a whole lot of credit for that. He was top 3 years in a row. Here he is tied with Cechmanek for third with 921, and then he had a 932 to lead the league, but the league is at 909 for save percentage. 911 save percentage here in 2004, which brings us close to an all-time high on this chart anyways from 1970. And Mika Kiprusoff leads the way with a 933. He's tied with Dwayne Rollison for that. 2006, because remember, there was no 2005. 2006, Cristobal Huet, out of nowhere, 929 save percentage, mostly because he plays in Montreal. 901 is the league average. So coming out of the season that's been lost, they encourage more offense, and save percentages drop from 911 to 901. But they go back up to 905, 909, 908, and we're back up to 911 by 2010 when Rask leads the way with a 931. In between, you'll notice that in 2006, Hasek had a 925 to finish second behind Huet. Chris Mason had a 925 in 2007. There's Marty Brodeur on the chart in 2007 with a 922, and he had a 927 in 1997. They're actually the only times that Marty Brodeur ends up on the chart as a top 3 in save percentage. 2008, Conklin is in the top 3. Ellis is in the top 3. It is Bizarro World in 2008 as Ellis leads the way with a 924 for the Nashville Predators. 2009, Tim Thomas comes out of nowhere, seemingly. Now, as a Bruins fan, I knew how good he was. I just, for whatever reason, they wouldn't give him the starter's job. He gets a 933 and leads the league. Rask then had a 931 the year after when Thomas was relegated to backup. And then Thomas had the save percentage lead with a 938 in 2011. So this is the only time where you see a goaltender get 2 out of 3, and in between his technically backup is the guy who gets the lead in save percentage. So Boston very well tended at the time. 2012, Elliott, same Elliott that plays in Philly right now, has a 940 save percentage. So you're getting into historical regions with that 940, and Jacques Plante says, he didn't beat me. 914, though, is the league average. So the league average is 914. 912 in 2013, 914 in 2014, 915, 915, 913, and then this past season, as I stated before, the average was 912. So what numbers can we glean out of this? First off, there's 20 Montreal logos on this board. 20. So on 20 different occasions, a Montreal goaltender's been top 3 in save percentage. Chicago, 14. Philadelphia, 14. The Islanders, 12. Almost all of that is Billy Smith, Rolly Melanson, and then the rest would be Glenn Resch. There hasn't been anybody other than Glenn Chico Resch, Billy Smith, and Rolly Melanson. Oh, and Kelly Rudy, too. It's not... I mentioned Rudy, and then I forget him. Buffalo has 13 mentions on here. A lot of that is Hasek. Absolutely a lot of that is Hasek. And then St. Louis has 8. And, of course, you've got Wakely here in 1970, Plant and Hall in 1969, so that's 2 right there. And then Cujo shows up and leads the league in 1993. For goaltenders and the idea of how many times they appear on this board, Hasek's on it 8 times, Patrick Roy 7 times, Dryden 6 times, Bernie Parent 5 times, Glenn Resch is on here 4 times, and then Marty Brodeur twice. So next time you see Glenn Resch on TV calling a broadcast, remember, 4 times he finished top 3 in save percentage in the entire National Hockey League. So there you go. There are some interesting names on here. There's some surprising names on here, and I've done my best to condense 50 years of measuring goaltenders and their save percentages as opposed to the rest of the league. And honestly, when you look at it, and I've got it all on the board here, there was a peak where, as I said, Jacques Plante was .041 ahead. Recently, it's been, over the last 5 years, .019, .018, .015, and then twice .019 again. .026 was Elliott in here. So that's one of those large differences. .025 twice, both times Thomas, and Rask .02. And it's one of those weird things. The smallest spread between the league leader and the overall average, Belfour in 2000, Ellis in 2008, and Elliott in 2016 when they were .015 ahead of the average. So there you go. I don't see a big, massive... And the reason I did this is simple. If you're one of these people that clings to the idea that goaltenders were just garbage in the 80s, there's not much I can tell you. But when you look at average, and then you look at the guys who led the league, there were still goaltenders who were stealing games, comparatively, and there were still goaltenders that were clearly a step above others. An interesting name on here, Reggie Lemelin's on here twice, Andy Moog's on here once. And those guys would go on to become a tandem for the Boston Bruins in the late 80s, early 90s. But it's interesting because, to me, a lot of the greats are on here. Some of the greats aren't. Like Lundqvist only shows up once. It's one of those strange things. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, this has been 50 years of looking over goalies' save percentage, the leaders versus the average. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.